All right. So, you sent over a bunch of stuff on this Fresh and Fit podcast.
Yeah.
Articles and forum posts and like even some of your own notes.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like you really want to kind of decode this thing. Like what's got everybody so, buzzing about it.
Definitely.
And maybe even a little riled up.
Yeah, they've definitely tapped into something.
Yeah, for sure.
They've built a really big audience.
Yeah.
And they're not afraid of controversy?
I was going to say understatement of the year.
Right.
Okay, so just on the surface, it looks like we've got these two guys, Myron Gaines and Walter Weeks.
Right.
They're giving out advice about, dating and relationships and how to level up your life generally. But it seems like there's way more going on here, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Under the surface.
Way more.
Yeah.
The dating advice is just the hook.
Okay.
The interesting part is the philosophy underneath it all.
Okay.
Which they often connect to this idea of the red pill. Have you ever heard of that?
I have. I've seen it online, but I always thought it was like one of those things that was better left unexplored, like a dark corner of the fridge that you just don't open.
Yeah, well, today we're opening the door.
Okay.
So like in the simplest terms, red pill thinking, at least how they present it, is about challenging the traditional narrative about men, especially in modern society.
So not exactly like a feel good, everyone gets a trophy kind of message.
No, definitely not. It's more like they're saying that men are at a disadvantage.
Okay.
Particularly when it comes to dating and relationships.
Okay.
And they argue that like the traditional paths to success and happiness, the ones our dads maybe followed, aren't really working anymore.
Okay.
They're offering like a different set of rules.
Okay.
A new game plan.
And that's where this idea of the high value man comes in, right?
Yes.
I mean, this is all over the stuff you sent.
It is.
This emphasis on fitness and money and, confidence.
Yeah.
It's like a checklist for achieving, alpha status.
And that's exactly why it resonates with a lot of men.
Okay.
Because imagine like you're feeling lost, maybe even a bit emasculated by the pressures of modern life.
Yeah.
And then they come in and they're like, hey, here's this clear blueprint.
Right.
This is how you reclaim your power, your value, your masculinity.
So it's empowering in a way.
Yes. For some guys, it's incredibly empowering.
But I feel like, wouldn't this, constant striving to be high value create a ton of pressure,
Of course.
Like you're never quite enough.
And that is one of the main criticisms.
Okay.
And I think it's a fair one.
Yeah.
Are they setting unrealistic expectations?
Mm-hmm.
Are they promoting this like, hyper-competitive view of relationships?
Yeah.
Almost transactional.
Yeah, it makes sense.
But we also have to think about the context, right? If these guys are feeling disillusioned with traditional narratives, this message can actually be a lifeline.
Okay.
So yeah, it's controversial.
Yeah.
But it speaks to a real sense of unease.
I get that.
That a lot of men are feeling.
Okay, so we've got this philosophy, right? And it's pretty provocative.
Yeah.
And they have this very specific ideal that they're promoting.
Right.
But also, they're just known for being straight up controversial, right?
Oh, for sure.
Like, I mean, some of the headlines in these articles are pretty wild.
Yeah, no holds barred.
Okay, so let's get into it.
Okay.
Where do they push buttons the most?
Well, I'd say one of the biggest flashpoints is traditional gender roles.
Okay.
They argue for like a very clear division between men and women, like going back to, let's say, a more classic approach to relationships.
Yeah, I can imagine how that goes over.
Right. Not very well with certain crowds.
Yeah.
And they're very open about their critiques of feminism, too.
Okay.
But it's important that they're not just rejecting the entire movement.
Okay.
They just take issue with specific aspects of it.
Okay.
Especially what they see as like, attacks on men or attempts to erase the differences between genders.
So they're picking and choosing their battles a little bit.
Exactly.
Okay, so they're not afraid to poke the bear.
No, not at all.
And do they have guests on the show that disagree with them?
They do.
Okay, so it's not just an echo chamber.
Oh, God, times.
Sometimes?
Sometimes.
But yeah, those can get heated.
I bet.
But they do at least provide that platform for debate.
Okay, I'll give them that.
Yeah.
Speaking of messy, we've got to talk about the sexual market value thing.
Yes.
SMV.
SMV.
It seems like every article mentioned it.
It does.
As one of their most controversial ideas.
Definitely.
What's the deal with that?
So it's interesting.
Okay.
They present SMV as like this ranking system in the dating market.
Okay.
Almost like a credit score for your attractiveness.
Okay.
And they factor in things like looks, status, age.
Even your social media following is very calculated.
Yeah.
Some might say brutal
Yeah.
way of assessing your worth. like in the dating game.
So no room for, romanticism or mystery?
Not really. No.
Okay.
They're basically arguing that you need to understand your SMV to be successful at dating.
Okay.
So know your worth, play the game strategically, and you increase your chances.
So it's very pragmatic.
Very, almost Darwinian even.
Yeah, and I imagine that rubs a lot of people the wrong way.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Many people find this concept dehumanizing.
Yeah.
And ethically questionable even.
Right.
But, and this is what's so interesting, some people find it empowering.
Really?
They see it as a way to take control, understand the rules of the game, and then play it to your advantage.
Interesting.
So it's complex.
Okay, so we've got this controversial podcast. They've got a controversial philosophy.
Yeah.
And they're not afraid to share these, hot takes. But why should any of this matter to our listener?
Right.
Why are we even doing this deep dive?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Because whether you love them or hate them, their popularity tells us something important about the cultural moment we're in.
Okay.
Because they've clearly struck a chord, especially with young men who are struggling with their identity, with masculinity, and their place in a world that's changing really fast.
So it's not just about dating advice.
No.
It's about something much bigger.
Much bigger.
Okay.
Because they're tapping into a deeper societal anxiety.
Okay.
A disillusionment with the old rules. And a desire for a clearer path forward.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And even if their solutions are debatable, I think it's important to understand why this message works for people.
Okay.
It helps us make sense of what men are dealing with today.
Okay, so I'm starting to see why we had to do this deep dive.
Good.
But we've only just scratched the surface, haven't we?
We have. There's much more to talk about.
Yeah.
But I think before we get into the next layer, we need to look at the specific dating advice they give.
Okay.
How does it line up with that red pill philosophy? What are the potential downsides? And is there anything useful here?
Okay.
Even if we don't buy their whole message.
All right, let's get into it.
It's interesting how they position themselves fresh and fit. Like within this whole manosphere online world. They're pretty good at connecting with these communities.
Okay.
A lot of which, align with those men's rights groups you mentioned.
Right. So are they just preaching to the choir then? If they're mostly talking to people who already agree with them, does that even matter? Or does it make it more powerful somehow?
That's the paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
On the one hand, you could say, they're just reinforcing these beliefs within a closed system.
Yeah.
And a lot of critics would say, it's an echo chamber. And it shuts down, productive discussion.
Right.
But then on the other hand, for men who feel like they're not being heard, or even marginalized by the mainstream, fresh and fit, offer this validation.
Okay.
Like a sense of belonging.
Right. So it's they've created this online brotherhood.
Yes, exactly.
So these ideas can flourish.
Yeah. And that sense of community can be powerful.
Oh, for sure, especially online.
Yeah.
But it also makes me think about the potential for things to go too far.
Of course.
When you're constantly surrounded by people who agree with you.
Yeah.
It's easy to lose perspective.
It is. And that's where, the ethical questions come up.
Right.
Are they just giving voice to something that's been silenced? Or are they actively contributing to something harmful?
Right.
It's a tough one.
Yeah. No easy answers there.
Not at all.
But definitely something to consider.
Definitely.
Well, they're certainly not afraid to be controversial. It's they almost their brand is about pushing buttons.
Right, and challenging the status quo.
Yeah.
There's a tell it like it is attitude.
Yeah.
Even if, what they're saying might be offensive to a lot of people.
Right.
And that's part of the appeal too.
Okay.
Especially in a world that feels, super sanitized, politically correct. They seem authentic.
Okay.
Unfiltered.
Even if that means, rubbing some people the wrong way.
Even abrasive, yeah.
Okay, so how do we make sense of all this? We've got this podcast, it's super popular.
Yeah.
They have this whole philosophy that seems to resonate with a lot of men.
It does.
And this whole online culture has sprung up around it. What's the takeaway,
Yeah, that's the big question.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to remember that they're not creating these trends.
Okay.
They're reflecting them.
Okay.
There's a real sense of anxiety and uncertainty among a lot of men about their role in today's world.
Okay.
Traditional masculinity is being questioned.
Yeah.
Economic opportunities are changing.
Right.
Social media is like, this constant barrage of images of success and, a certain type of masculinity.
Right. And it can feel unattainable.
It can, yeah.
It's like they're caught in this weird in-between space where the old rules don't work,
right,
but the new ones haven't been written yet.
Exactly. And they come in and they offer this roadmap, this set of guidelines.
To navigate this new world.
Exactly.
And it may not be, a perfect map.
Of course not.
But it's something.
It is. It's a direction.
Yeah, it's a sense of control in a world that feels very chaotic.
So even if we, disagree with their message, it's important to try to understand why it resonates with people.
Absolutely, because if we just dismiss it as like misogynistic or outdated, then we're missing this chance to actually engage with these guys. Yeah, to understand.
To understand, yeah.
Okay, get it.
So we need to understand their concerns, their anxieties, even their desires.
Yeah.
If we want to actually have a conversation about masculinity.
Okay, that makes sense.
In the 21st century.
All right, well, before we get too lost in, the big picture, I want to bring it back to the show itself.
Okay.
So, they're known for these controversial takes.
Yes.
Especially on dating.
Right.
But is there any actual advice?
Oh, yeah.
Or is it all just philosophy and social commentary?
They definitely give concrete advice.
Okay.
Often woven into those larger points.
Okay.
And it tends to be very direct and, pretty traditional.
Okay, give us an example.
Sure.
What kind of, gems are they dropping on their listeners?
Well, like they're big on traditional gender roles.
Right.
So for men, they often say, be assertive.
Okay.
Take the lead.
Yeah.
Be the provider. And for women, they tend to emphasize, femininity, supporting their partner.
Yeah.
Creating a stable home environment.
I can hear half our listeners groaning right now.
I know, right?
Yeah.
It's definitely going to rub some people the wrong way.
For sure.
Especially those who embrace, more progressive relationships.
Right, right.
But it's important to remember that this is their perspective.
Yeah.
And it does resonate with a big chunk of their audience.
Yeah, they're not claiming to have all the answers.
No.
But they are offering a specific vision.
Yes.
Of how relationships should work.
Exactly.
And it's rooted in those traditional values.
It is.
And a clear division of gender roles.
Right. So it all comes back to this idea that in a world that feels, increasingly confusing, there's this appeal to clear answers and traditional values.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that's what makes them so fascinating, even if you totally disagree with them.
Yeah.
Because they're holding up this mirror to our society and reflecting back our anxieties, our desires. They're making us confront these questions about gender, about relationships, about how masculinity is changing.
And maybe they're making us have some difficult conversations.
Maybe, hopefully.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
About how we define these things going forward.
That's the hope, yeah.
All right, so we've really gone deep on Fresh and Fit, right? Their controversial philosophy, their views on gender roles, their very specific dating advice.
Right.
But I think what's really sticking with me is this idea that they've tapped into something deeper.
Definitely.
Like a cultural anxiety, especially among men.
Yes.
It's like they've hit a nerve, exposed this vulnerability that maybe guys are feeling, but don't know how to, even talk about.
That's a great point. And I think it gets to the heart of why they've become so popular.
Okay.
Whether you like them or not.
Yeah.
They're giving a voice to these men who feel like they're being left behind.
Okay.
Ignored, even demonized by mainstream culture.
So it's not just about like getting dates or being attractive.
Yeah.
It's about something bigger, right?
It's much bigger.
Yeah.
It's about their identity.
Okay.
Their purpose, their place in the world.
So they're feeling disillusioned.
Yeah, like the old rules don't work anymore, and they don't have a new set of rules yet.
Right, and Fresh and Fit come in.
Exactly.
And they offer their own rules.
Right, their own blueprint.
Yeah, but their blueprint is, well, we've talked about it.
Yeah.
It's controversial.
It is.
Right, like traditional gender roles, hyper-competitiveness. Sometimes it feels, honestly, dehumanizing.
It can.
So how do we square that, like they're popular, but their message is problematic.
That's the tough question.
It is.
And I don't think there's an easy answer.
Yeah.
But we have to remember that they're not, like, operating in a vacuum. Their message resonates because it taps into these existing anxieties, frustrations that men are already feeling.
So Are they the villains here?
I don't think it's that simple. Okay. I see them more as a symptom.
Of a bigger problem.
Exactly.
So if they're a symptom, what's the underlying condition?
Well, there are a lot of factors. Yeah. But one of the biggest, I think, is this disconnect between the old ideas of masculinity and the realities of the world today.
Right, like those old scripts.
Right, the breadwinner, the protector, the strong, silent type. They don't really fit anymore.
No, not in a world where, you know, women are empowered.
Exactly.
And the economy is changing.
Emotional vulnerability is more valued.
So there's this sense of being lost.
Yes.
Like not knowing how to be a man in this new world.
And that uncertainty can lead to anxiety, frustration.
Yeah, and make men vulnerable to messages that offer, you know, some kind of answer.
Even extreme ones.
Yeah. And that's what Fresh and Fit do, right?
Yeah, they offer a clear vision.
Yeah.
Even if it's controversial. Yeah. They have the rules and the roadmap.
And for some men, that's appealing.
It is, that certainty, that belonging.
Yeah, even if it's ultimately harmful.
Unfortunately, yes.
So where do we go from here?
Right.
Like if it's a symptom of a bigger problem, what's the solution?
Well, I think it starts with honest conversations about what it means to be a man today.
Okay.
We need to challenge those old stereotypes, create space for men to, you know, express their emotions, their vulnerabilities.
Without shame.
Exactly.
And this has to be a conversation that involves everyone, right?
It does. Men, women, everyone.
Yeah.
We need to create a more inclusive definition of masculinity.
So moving beyond these rigid roles and recognizing that there's no one right way to be a man.
It's about diversity, empathy, emotional intelligence.
It's a big challenge.
It is.
But an important one.
Very important.
And maybe, you know, maybe Fresh and Fit have actually helped in a way.
It's possible.
By, you know, showing the flaws in their own approach.
Yeah, maybe they've paved the way for something better.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left with a lot to think about.
Me too.
Fresh and Fit have shown us a glimpse into the minds of these men. But they've also raised these big questions about the future of masculinity and the kind of world we want.
And those are questions we all have to answer.
Yeah.
This conversation needs to continue.
Everywhere.
Everywhere. Online, offline.
Yeah.
In our homes, in our communities.
Absolutely.
It's an ongoing process.
Well said. And to our listener, I hope this deep dive has given you a better understanding of Fresh and Fit and what they represent.
Right.
Keep exploring, keep questioning.
And keep the conversation going.
This is just the beginning.
Yeah.